We are Sixfold Project. Six and fold is friends over long distance. For this particular project, we wanted a far-reaching theme, something that bridged the gaps between our particular individual processes. Meanwhile was the perfect connection. So if we look at Jennifer in Lake Placid, she was using fiberglass and wax to produce her works. At the same time, in Edge Hill, Barbara Dover was filling cones with cement and fur. At the same time, over in New Zealand, or in connection with us working here, Raewyn was having photographs taken of herself as a stranger in a strange land. And then while this is going on, down in Melbourne, Louisa is sourcing agricultural bags so that she can produce her hanging bags here. And Rose, over here, is in Cairns and she is actually crocheting copper wire. Meanwhile, in Kawara Beach, I was creating stitched and assembled paintings out of canvas and mixed media.
So my intention for Meanwhile was to celebrate the simple bowl form. As a potter, it's a delightful thing to make the curve in a bowl. What I wanted to do was take that curve and take it from a functional object into an aesthetic object by taking the clay from the wheelhead and onto the wall. One of the greatest hurdles I faced after many months of research into ceramic materials was the failing of my kiln. I needed to be flexible, I needed to find another way to use the same bowl form but move in my materials. I've experimented with many materials and I finally settled on plaster with a lovely nylon fibre that reinforces it against shock. And by moving away from ceramics into this plaster and encaustic surface, it gave me a chance to rethink and play with colour, get away from the complexities of a potter's palette and more into the painter's palette, which is a lovely direct use of colour. So this body of work is a celebration of form and colour.
So my work's based on memory and loss and trying to find a connection to things that are unknowable or things that are unsaid. So because I'm concept-based, I can use quite a lot of different materials, and in the process of using those materials, I tend to meander through techniques and outcomes until I find the one that best suits the concept. And I find that I gravitate towards processes that are time-consuming and repetitive because it allows me to take pause, to settle down, to have a little bit of quiet, to calm myself from a busy day, and then to allow my hands to be busy and my mind to wander onto things that I perhaps haven't considered previously. And in the process, it's like those unconsidered thoughts become whispers within the work. Yeah, I guess it's about, being able to say things with a visual language that you can't say with ordinary words.
Certainly my Islander heritage is a common thread throughout all my work, definitely, because my mother is Kuka, a New Zealander, brought up in New Zealand and Australia. So in coming back to Penryn, it's quite hard sometimes to fit in, because I wasn't brought up there. Trying to find a happy blend or marriage between the two cultures where I could still stay myself but fit into the place where I'm living now as well. I knew it had to be me in the works. It couldn't have been anybody else. I think we all quite often hide things with humour. So I suppose it was about, I guess, showing how raw I was at the time, but sort of masking it or cloaking it with, with the superhero, hiding behind a costume. I guess it was about being real.
I I spend time each morning on an elevated site behind my house, and I noticed when I was bending forward that I could see back behind me and that the scene appeared to be inverted. So I could see the neighbouring hill slope and the trees inverted, and I thought that's a really interesting perspective because it's hanging from the world rather than sort of rooted into the surface of the world. And I sort of thought, well, this is something that I could pursue with an artwork, and how could I use this to represent the tenuous grip that we have on the world and our survival. So I wanted to look for something that could be an obvious symbol of the way we sort of cultivate and clear and control and adapt the world to our own purposes. So for me, the agricultural stacks were a really good choice. So I've sort of cut them and reassembled them and changed them into something else, which is quite like the way we treat the planet, when we're acting upon it and adapting it to our purposes. There's this often a common idea that I use in my work is that things are quite interrelated and quite similar. So I use the same, you'll see in the work, the same scale. The human form and the tree forms in the work are the same size. There's no hierarchy between them. I'm always interested in when you sort of release the work into the gallery space and it's presented, and then people approach the work and then bring their own ideas. And yeah, so even just sitting in the space this afternoon, I was thinking, it actually sort of almost looks like an abattoir or something, like they've been slaughtered and hung up to dry or hung up to be, part of some kind of macabre process. So I think, each time we look at the work and present the work, it shifts slightly and has different ways that people can engage with it, even the artist.
For my own work, I have 3 particular stages. I begin with an idea, and then I do a whole lot of writing to actually substantiate my ideas. For Meanwhile, I wrote a poem, and this became the basis for all of the artwork that continued from there. My second step that I follow is I go into my studio and I draw. If it's a large work, I'll pin lots and lots of big pieces of paper onto the wall, and using charcoal and gesso I will do a big drawing, and that then becomes the basis of the paintings.
My work points to threats, alarms, caution and signs about the foreboding of climate change. The forms I use in my work come from common ubiquitous safety equipment that we see everywhere, that are around on roads and often force us to take detours. A major work in my show called Reckoning is made up of safety cones that I've cast out of concrete and embedded animal-derived materials such as horsehair, cattle tail hair, fur and hide, cattle hide. These works are a contrast of concrete and a soft living creature, an animal, and they also give thought to mourning and memorial. A question in my work is, how are animals living with the extremes of climate change?
There are 2 collaborative works. The video work, 60 seconds, put together by Jennifer Baumadre with a lot of patience and hard work, is a snippet into each member's life, a snippet into their homes, their working environment and what they may be doing at any given time in context with each other. The second collaborative work, A Crooked Line, I think is a more revealing and intimate look into the art practices and processes of the Sixfold members. It's remnants of old works, it's partially completed works, it's a collection of treasured oddments that normally float around in our studios. And these bits and pieces, these scribbles and scraps, are an invaluable tool in the artist's arsenal.
The materials are really important to all of us, and you'll see patterns across our practices and similarities in the way that we work perhaps, or different ideas that overlap.
And this constant sense of experimentation in materials you'll see is right across each member of Sixfold Project. It's one of the things that really brings us together and underpins our collaboration.
So TAFE is the place where creative dreams begin. It was when I studied and it continues to be. And that's how Louisa, Raywin and I met. We were students at TAFE, and Barbara, Jenny and Julie were actually our educators. So these really strong, powerful, kind and generous women encouraged us to believe that we could do anything we wanted to, and so we did. And while we were studying our Diploma of Visual Arts, we formed an arts collective called Knock Knock. And through that collective, we produced an exhibition program for artists by artists, and we sort of sought that creative excellence.
Feedback is an incredible part of arts practice, and getting a well-balanced, well-informed feedback from people is quite difficult. So working with a group who have been working together for years, it's a great advantage for us because we all understand each other's processes and concerns. So the feedback is it's accurate.
At the core, it's about the enormous respect that we have for each other's work. They're a great bunch, I can say. I'd be lost without them in this group, definitely. Yeah, my happy place. For me, just being able to still do art and exhibit, from a remote location is, it's amazing to me. Granted, our internet's very slow, but still,
With a group, something happens. There's a creative momentum, and that helps you surge forward with new ideas and on new paths. And we all expand being as a part of a group, our own artistic endeavours and willingness to take the risks in art. And I think Meanwhile is the evidence of that.